Hello, my name is Barbara Gabogrecan and I am a silk artist. I've just created this design called Autumn Gum, and this is actually the first one. So whoever gets this one has got the unique original design. A lot of people crave to get the first design when you have limited editions, and this will go in my limited edition section, which means there will only be 5 of this design used. The gum nuts and all the leaves and that go with it are very popular in Australia, and I couldn't quite think at first how to get them to cover such a long piece of silk and sort of not to fall out of room or to have it all shrunk up and needing more in the space that I still had left. So obviously I did the design on paper first, and had the paper the right size for the silk and worked directly on the paper at first, and I actually found it quite easy. I was surprised how easy it was to do it. Those leaves are so big and flat in the autumn gum. In any gum flowers actually, you'll find these big flat leaves, and they're not one colour usually. They have a sort of a cinear colour in them, a slight burnt edge sometimes, little bits of green, little bits of gold. It's just an interesting way of painting leaves. I've never done them like this before. You're watching me here paint some of the background, and I just wanted you to notice just how much water I use. You can't make your colours lighter by adding white to them like you can in most paints, so you have to use water. So I start off by having the shape I'm about to paint wet with water, and then as I put the paint on, I use a lot of water to work it in. These dyes I should say, are not easy to move around. Once you get them down, they want to stay just as they are, which is quite dark and strong, and unless I make them very pale by putting water in the dyes, which I don't like to do, then I have to add the water here. Now another little thing I'm doing is it'll be nearly impossible for you to see it on this. I'm using a colour that's supposed to be a dark green, but it looks nearly black, and I put tiny little bits of it around the edge of the flower and up some of the lines of the leaves and the background, and I just put tiny little dots of this colour, and as I said, it likes to stay there. Water around it, and then place salt there, and the salt draws that colour to it, making some lovely little linear patterns wherever I've done that. And you can see here I'm adding a darker blue around this gum, and I think you'll see me putting little dark spots on in a moment. The silk itself is only, there I go, tiny little dots all around. You can see it's quite dark, and if I just left it like that on a wet background, it would float out on the black and it still would look alright, but I just like the way the salt reacts to it and drags it around into patterns. Now, as I was saying, the silk is only attached at two ends, so it's very mobile, the silk, and you've got to sort of account for that when you're working on it. If you want to rub in colour, you've got to take into account that the silk's going to bounce around as you try and do it, and therefore you've got to sort of have a lot of control in your hand to make sure that you don't get the colours going in places where you don't want them. Now, I'm using two gutters with my drawing. One is a solvent black one, which I normally use, and the other is a water-based gold, which I have only used a couple of times. And I just wanted to experiment myself to see how much I could use the gold to give effects that I can't normally give. And as well as, I don't cover all the drawed areas with the gold, but I do sometimes follow the black line. But around the flower, in the centre of the flower, I've done a lot of gold leaves and not so many, sorry, I said leaves, I meant lines, and not so many black lines. Now, it does give an interesting effect, but it does take some of the emphasis of the colour off it. The pinks and purples that I painted with don't look as strong as what I normally use. Now that's all right for me because this design is meant to be soft and sinuous and flowing. I didn't want it to be too aggressive, which some of my work can be. And I knew that it would be a challenge for me because it meant I had to keep my colours washed down. But I think I'm happy with the results. You've got to get used to it when you're the artist. You can see there I'm putting a purpley colour around the edge, and then I'm using water on my brush to push that purpley colour onto the rest of the flower. Now, that colour doesn't, even though you can see it there fairly easily, a lot of it's sitting on top of the gold. And I've found that what happens when you have a lot of gold like that, it rolls off the edge of the gold, so you don't see it so much. And that didn't worry me. As I said, I wanted it to be very soft and gentle. And when I put this colour around the outside of the flower, I found that it's sort of left a line, if you like, around the gold that was the tips of the lines of what the petal is made up of. One of the things I'm renowned for is the fineness of my work, and as you watch what I'm doing, I'm sure you'll see that there's a great deal of fine detail that I do. In here, in behind the little gum nuts and leaves, there's some space, and it's all got to be filled in, and I still use at least 3 colours, and that gives it depth. And if the colours are a bit darker blues, then it makes the flowers stand out a bit stronger too. Now, of course, you don't have to do fine painting like this. If you want to do silk painting, you can keep it simpler and bolder. It's just, this is my style. And it's a style that I find very satisfying, and I hope you do too. You can clearly see the gold lines there in the background and on the leaves and on the flowers that aren't painted as yet. And I find the gold adds a lovely luminosity to the whole work, and is something that I think I'll be using perhaps always from now on, because it just gives that added bit of interest that I like, and I find it very satisfying to get the extra luminosity that you can get from silk and dyes and salt patterns. Now, as I said earlier, I always use water first. Get the area I'm going to work on wet. You have to be careful when you're painting a number of colours in a shape, and you don't want them to bleed into each other to any extent, and yet you want them to be subtly blended into each other. Knowing your colours on the colour wheel is very important when you're painting on silk. You need to know what colours go with what colours. You need to have a general understanding of what you want in your colours, and it's worthwhile spending a little bit of time doing some research before you start painting. I've also been asked, what sort of brush I use, and is it one that they can use with a fine point. One lady said she's got one with a long fine point. Well, I've never used one like that. I mean, it certainly would have a reason to be used, but in my case, it's sort of like a fairly hard bristle. I think it's camel hair, and it has a nice fine point, but my poor old brush is dying. I often dip it in the dye, and as I'm about to put it on the silk, I see a long tendril of hair jutting out of the base, and I have to pull it out. So I'm going to have to go shopping shortly to buy another brush, and I think all artists get very fond of their tools, and so to have a new brush, ooh, it scares me. I hate the thought of it. I hope you can notice how I'm subtly blending colours, putting colours next to each other, and then roughing them up. There's 4 or 5 colours in this sleeve, and if you decide to, well, you have decided to buy this, or you wouldn't be getting the tape. The tape is only going to clients who have purchased this particular painting, and you will be able to see, when you're looking at the actual painting of the leaves, just how intricate they are in colour, how it's blended in, and how many colours are used. Now, I didn't want to show you, me painting the whole thing, apart from it taking too long. It would have been, what, 4 or 5 hours. It also was too big a file, and I don't think you need to see it or you get bored. So I have cut it considerably, and I just wanted you to see how I approached my silk painting. Look at the lovely patterns in the background where the salt's been. You find that some dyes give you a better result than others. That particular blue gives me a marvellous result, and I didn't realise until I was doing this that light brownish colour also gives some interesting patterns. Whereas the lightest blue you see there, it just sort of gives dots. It doesn't give pools and patterns forming around the dots. I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but it does give you, when you're working, an opportunity to find which colours give you what result, and perhaps make a note of that in your notebook so that you remember in future. Look at the gold, you can even see it there fairly well. It's making some lovely shimmery effects. See that the silk's a lot firmer to paint on, because I'm up near where it's actually attached to they're called picots, the little spikes that I attach the silk on at either end. So when I'm up near one end or the other, it's tauter and allows me to do fine work without worrying about the silk bouncing all over the place. Those little leaves, the little stems on the leaves I'm painting there, they're very small, very thin, but I still use 2 or 3 colours on each part of them. See, I took one colour up there, Now, I imagine I'll do another colour at the base. Yep, another colour in there. And then of course I've got a blend where they join so they don't look too harsh and obvious. The little spaces I've left between the gold gutta and the black edge, it is very hard to paint that small. I'm using the same colour throughout. It's a gold and orangey colour. Actually, I think it's straight orange, but because it's such a small space that it's working in, you don't notice quite how orange it is. Can you see the little black marks up the sides of the leaves? That's what you can't see is the little patterns that those little black marks are creating. But when you look at your scarf, you'll certainly see them. I'm just showing the last of this video, painting one more flower. I must admit it was the reason I started using this as a design. It's been a very successful type of design that I've used in a number of different paintings I've done over the years. As I said earlier, I've never done one that goes from one end to the other like this one does. Now, of those special ones that there are only 5, each one will be slightly different to the one before it, and I've already thought of some ways of changing this design for the second one. It will still look like what it is, but it'll have some interesting little changes take place. Well, I hope you enjoy both watching how your scarf was painted, and I especially hope you enjoy wearing it, or if giving it as a gift, your friend or family will enjoy it. Bye for now.